Okay, so if you remember in my review of Renfield, before my dad and I saw that movie, we watched the original 1931 Dracula, because I always watch Universal monster movies with my dad. So before the two of us saw this movie, we watched Werner Herzog's Nosferatu the Vampire, which came out in 1979. And whew, that movie, if I could describe it in one word, it's macabre. Pretty grim, but that's just Dracula for you, you know? So now let's finally review this movie. Sorry I'm late. The Last Voyage of the Demeter. So The Last Voyage of the Demeter is based off of one chapter from the original Bram Stoker Dracula novel. So yeah, this movie is just one chapter within the larger story. Within the story of Dracula, the vampire lives in Transylvania in Castle Dracula. He's purchased a house in London, and so this movie is the chapter based on what happens during Dracula's journey from Transylvania to London. He's inside one of 50 crates that are boarded onto this ship called the Demeter, and so now this unsuspecting crew is getting picked off one by this unknown monster. And now we have our horror monster movie with the vampire Dracula. And I know this movie didn't exactly do well in the box office, nor was I really expecting it to, but I still had some fun with it, and we got some pretty big names in the cast. The main character Clemens is played by Corey Hawkins, who I've seen in a couple of things now, and he's really good. He pulls off a pretty good British accent. Liam Cunningham is the captain. He's always great. In fact, he was one of the more sympathetic characters in this movie, because of his relationship with his grandson, who is also aboard the ship, so you know that's gonna end well. We also have David Dastmalchian in the cast, and I'm telling you, he's such a good actor, I'm waiting for him to be the main character in a movie, because I don't think I've really seen that yet, and it needs to happen soon because he always impresses me. His character Wojciech is like the cynical one, the one who's like, I don't care if that traumatizing thing just happened, we gotta get to London, no matter what. Yeah, he was kind of a dick. And among all this chaos that's going on, they also discover this woman on board. And actually, I kind of like the fact that they addressed that they saw women as bad luck on their ship. I was like, yeah, I remember that from Pirates of the Caribbean. So yeah, that actually was a thing back then.
It's frightful bad luck to bring a woman aboard, sir.
All right. But she's the one who knows about this monster, and therefore could possibly help this crew survive, or at least delay their inevitable deaths for as long as they can. Now, in the case of this movie, I saw good and bad in it. There were quite a few things I thought were pretty cool in this movie. First off, this might sound trivial, but their use of practical sets and effects. Like when the movie starts, we get this big set, you feel like you're back in that era. You see this big old wooden ship, and you're like, yep, that is tangible and real, that's awesome. That being said, the visual effects weren't always practical. Sometimes when you had the establishing shots of the ship out on the sea, I was like, yeah, that is CG water. I could tell. But when it was practical, it was really cool. And this movie being essentially a bottle film with a monster, with a bunch of guys that are gonna get picked off one by one, yeah, this movie does play the teasing game, you know? Like Godzilla, where you don't see a lot of the monster at first. It's like one night, someone in the crew will see something, and then it just cuts to the next morning, and that crew member is now suddenly gone. You know, it teases the monster, it doesn't give you dessert right out the gate. Which I guess in a movie like this, where it's really seen from the point of view of the crew of the Demeter instead of revolving around Dracula, I do appreciate that tease. Because yeah, this movie does revolve around the Demeter's crew. It's not really a Dracula-centered movie, which is an interesting take on the story of Dracula, or at least one chapter of the story of Dracula. And so yeah, the first couple of Dracula scenes, the vampire really is treated like a monster in the shadows, kind of like the first real Hulk scene in The Incredible Hulk. It was like that. And that's cool. And then of course when all the shit starts going down really towards the end, it's awesome. Dracula's design, I am kind of neutral on it. I get that they were going more towards a creature design since Dracula is in fact a monster. And in this part of his story, he's not really in the most humane stage of existence right now. He's just a rabid dog let off the leash and slaughtering all these people. And so we got a gore fest. This movie is rated R. And when Dracula's killing people, alright, I'll tell you this. If there's one thing I'm gonna remember from the violence in this movie, it's the sound effect of when Dracula has bitten into someone's neck and you hear the slurping of him drinking the blood. That sound effect in particular was really cranked up. It was dialed up to 11 so we could all hear it. Made the scenes pretty brutal to watch, I'm not gonna lie. So when Dracula is just killing all these people, you're having fun in that I don't care about the characters really sort of way. Because that is one thing that did misfire for me about this movie. I didn't really care too much about any of these characters. I mean, I like the actors of course, and the characters are good people. You know, it's not like they're a bunch of assholes where you're just waiting for Dracula to slaughter them all because you're like, yeah, these guys deserve it. No, it's not like that at all. There's a scene when someone dies, it's like really sad, and I felt it a little bit. I was like, shit, alright, well that sucks. But I wasn't, you know, crying or anything. I'll be fine. In fact, looking back, visually speaking, that death was pretty cool looking. Makes me feel pretty morbid, but yeah. Because really the biggest problem with this movie is the fact that, yeah, it is just one chapter in a novel. I really felt like the studio was like, okay, we got this one chapter, we're gonna stretch it out into a 2-hour movie, where it's gonna be Dracula slaughtering the crew of a ship. Alright, cool, that scene's gonna last about 15 minutes. What do we do in the hour and 45 minutes leading up to that? I don't know, let's just have the crew do stuff. Let's have them be scared of the vampire. Let's have them talk about the vampire. Let's have some attempts at character development. And it didn't all quite stick the landing with me. There are a few boring scenes in this movie. Really, like, for example, if I'm talking about Corey Hawkins' character Clemens, he's really only ever known in this movie as the ship doctor. We don't know if he has a family at home or a girlfriend or boyfriend. I didn't really feel any emotional connection to any of the characters here. Well, except for the captain and his grandson. That was done pretty well. But I do feel like this movie should have been, like, at least 15 minutes shorter. It really did feel like this chapter of a novel was stretched out into 2 hours. I really felt the stretching action of it. However, this movie does have one huge thing going for it, and that is its score composed by one Bear McCreary. If you don't know Bear McCreary, he's one of my favorite film composers working today. He scored 10 Cloverfield Lane and The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, along with some other awesome stuff. Bear McCreary is always a win, because the score in this movie was awesome. Within the first 5 minutes, we get some awesome score that does kind of sound like Pirates of the Caribbean, but it did immerse me into the time period. I was like, yeah, I'm being sucked in. And throughout the entire movie, whether the score was being eerie or ethereal, or a mix of both, it was amazing. So huge props to Bear McCreary and his awesomeness and his score. So in the end, The Last Voyage of the Demeter is fun. I love the practical effects. I love the setting of the movie. Give me a movie out on a ship in the middle of the ocean and have it be not boring, I'll be there. And for the most part, this movie is not boring. It is a couple of times, and I do wish I cared a little more about these characters. That's a pretty big minus point for this one. But Dracula was awesome. The lore is really cool, as per usual with him. The action and the horror elements and the deaths, they were all pretty cool. I would say this movie is still worth checking out. So for The Last Voyage of the Demeter, I will say, wait until this movie's at a discount price, then go see it. So The Last Voyage of the Demeter, have you seen it yet? What are your thoughts on it? And if you have seen it, what did you like better, this or Renfield? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And of course, thank you for subscribing. Peace!